Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for attending Moving Towards Sexual Pleasure and Emotional Healing After Female Genital Cutting. I'm Catherine, a programs intern at Sahiyo. I've been so honored to have the opportunity to work with our speakers today, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear from them about their work and life experiences. Our webinar today will explore the mental and emotional consequences of FGC, how FGC can impact sexuality, and how survivors everywhere are working to heal. Next slide. This webinar could not have been possible without the support of our partner organizations, FORMA, the End FGM Canada Network, Keep the Drum and Lose the Knife, and We Speak Out, many of whose founders and co-founders are here with us today. Next slide. During this webinar, you guys will get the chance to hear from 3 award-winning and multi-talented speakers, Farzana Doctor, Joanna Vergoth, and Sarian Karim-Kamara. Today, we are also joined by Mariya Taher, who will lead the formal Q&A portion of this event, which will be followed by an open question period from the audience. If you would like to ask our panelists a question during the audience Q&A, please type it into the Q&A box. If you would like to remain anonymous, please make sure to select that option before you submit your questions. Otherwise, we're going to allow asking participants to turn on their camera and audio in order to ask the question. Next slide. Mariya Taher, who will be leading the formal Q&A portion of this event, is the co-founder of Sahiyo and has dedicated her life to the fight to abolish FGC. Her work has been crucial to helping criminalize FGC in Massachusetts and in the United States at large. Next slide. Our first panelist joining us today is Joanna Vergoth, who is a clinical social worker and psychoanalyst who works with victims of FGC and is also the co-founder of FORMA, a nonprofit aimed at raising awareness about FGC. Next slide. Our next panelist, Sarian Karim-Kamara, is the founder and director of Keep the Drum and Lose the Knife. She works in the UK and in Sierra Leone, fighting to abolish gender-based violence and FGC in all forms. Next slide. Finally, our third panelist is Farzana Doctor, who is a critically acclaimed author, social worker, and is the co-founder of We Speak Out and the End FGM Canada Network. Farzana Doctor's latest novel, 7, explores the often complicated relationship between modern and traditional customs and the struggle to end the practice of khatna, or FGC, in the Bora community. Next slide. And without further ado, we can end the slideshow, and I'll turn it over to Mariya for the formal Q&A with our speakers.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming and attending our webinar. We're really looking forward to having this conversation today on female genital mutilation / cutting, or FGMC, or FGC as I might refer to it, and really discussing the psychological and sexual impact, which often is just too little given attention to in regards to the consequences of it. So for those who are unaware, I wanted to give just a little bit of context about what FGMC is. FGMC involves the partial or total removal of the external female genitalia or other injury to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. And it is recognized internationally as a human rights violation, torture, and an extreme form of violence against women and girls. And it is usually performed between birth and puberty. FGMC is a global issue affecting over 200 million girls and women each year, with many more, total, and then with many more at risk each year. It is really only in the last few years that the UN has recognized the global nature of FGMC, and it does occur globally, and this means that it affects women of all different races, religions, ethnicities, economic status, and educational levels. In fact, a recent report that came out from Equality Now, the US and FGMC network, and the NFGM European network found that FGC occurs in 92 countries around the world. I'll also just briefly mention some US statistics as well, though recognizing our speakers are from around the world, and I'm sure some of the attendees are as well. But within the US, the CDC has reported that 500,000 women and girls have undergone or are at risk of undergoing FGMC. However, this data is actually an underrepresentation due to a few different factors, including that it only includes immigrant populations to the US, and it only includes those immigrant populations from about 30 countries where there is high-level data collection by UNICEF. and that those countries are mostly within the sub-Saharan Africa, which means that unfortunately this number does not include second or third or subsequent generations born in the US. The number also does not include women immigrants from other parts of the world where FGC may be practiced in the 92 countries, as I mentioned. Additionally, up until the 50s, FGC was used in the US and Europe as a cure for women's hysteria, mental illness, to treat lesbianism, or for nymphomania. And those US statistic does not include those figures or the women affected by that as well. And just to give a little bit more context, one woman in 2016, Renee Bergstrom, shared her story publicly about being one of those women who underwent it in the 50s. She was 3 years old and had FGC done to her as a way to prevent masturbation, and it was performed by a doctor. After she shared her story, many other women in communities have come out and shared their stories throughout the US from similar backgrounds as her as well. So it is very much an under-recognized issue in terms of who it impacts and where it occurs as well. So with that context in mind, I'd like to now just turn it over to our panelists and really start our cafe discussion. And I've spoken a bit about what FGMC is and the number of women and girls at risk. So for my first question, well, first of all, I would love for the panelists, if you would like to introduce yourself when you're answering and tell us a little bit more about yourself, feel free to do that. But then my first question really is about what are some of the mental health consequences and sexual health impacts that FGC survivors face in regards to their sexuality? And I'd like to ask Joanna to answer this first.
Okay, can everyone hear me all right? First, I'd like to say that I am a trauma-based therapist, and I work with women who are suffering from PTSD, not only from FGC, but from domestic violence, from sexual abuse, from child sexual abuse, physical abuse, all sorts of abuses. So PTSD is a reaction to a stressor, a traumatic stress, like one of the issues I just described or mentioned. Many of these FGC survivors also experience PTSD symptoms. And since we're focusing on psychosexual aspects for this webinar, I just want to focus on that as my answer right now. And start by saying that female sexuality is a complex integration of biological, psychological, physiological, sociocultural, and interpersonal factors. And that all of those factors contribute together into a combined experience of physical, emotional, and interpersonal relationship satisfaction. And within this very complicated complex, every woman is uniquely different. So that's the first thing I want to get across to everybody. There are many women who have undergone FGC and do not have sexual problems. There are many women who have intact genitals and have many sexual problems. So just because you've undergone FGC doesn't automatically mean you have sexual problems. And once you realize what the anatomy is like and how the clitoris is 3 times larger inside of our bodies than outside, you can recognize that clitoral stimulation can happen in many places. I do want to say, though, that those that are old enough to remember the day that they were cut will never forget the day that they were cut. And so it does leave a lifelong impact. And trauma can be severe or it can be minimal, depending on the situation and how the woman seeks therapy, has a loving relationship, finds ways to overcome and ground herself so that she can stay present to the sexual experience and enjoy pleasure instead of having the flashbacks that so many women suffer from. That's the most common symptom that I find in my practice. What happens in a traumatic event is that the mammalian brain, the limbic brain, there's a part of it called the amygdala, and that fires up, and over 30 stress hormones are released in our body and brain in a traumatic event. And those are released so that we can fight or flee the trauma that we're experiencing. And they usually wear off the minute you can successfully get away or fight off whatever encounter you're facing that's death-defying almost. But if you cannot fight or flee successfully, that trauma gets stuck in the nervous system. And what happens is that you can be re-triggered at any time. A scent, a place, a smell, a person, an internal body memory can re-trigger the events of the actual event. And so that's what a flashback is, and many, many women suffer from these flashbacks. Now that's the psychological aspect. I could get into that, and we could spend a whole other hour talking about that, but I'd like to discuss what happens when you are suffering from an incomplete reaction. So you're having sexual abuse, or somebody is cutting you, and the instinct is to push away, get away, run away. And if you can't, like I said, that trauma stays stuck inside you. And anytime you're in a similar position, or if you feel threatened, or if you feel excited, as you do when there's an arousal system going on. If you have PTSD, that arousal system is already built up and working over time with PTSD symptoms. So your heart rate is pumping, your respiration is increasing like it would be in a trauma experience. Instead, what's happening is you're having intimate arousal experience, but you can't allow yourself to be aroused because you're already feel so threatened, and the vulnerability is too much for you to tolerate. So you can't let go of that threat response. That's in essence what's happening neurochemically. But what happens in the body is that there's a clenching, there's a tenseness, and there's a reduction in desire, in response, in orgasmic response. There's painful intercourse because of the physiological responses, reactions to FGM. Most of the women I work with have been infibulated, and so they have very severe physical and medical problems that interfere with their sexual functioning. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of cut you've had, you can still have many physical medical problems. At any rate, you can have vaginismus, you can have pain and burning sensation in your vulva, you can have pelvic inflammatory disease. All of this contributes to absence or reduction of sexual desire and difficulties reaching orgasm. And then what happens is that pain creates more pain memories. When you have a painful reaction, your pain receptors go back to the original time you had that pain. And that pain memory is reactivated. And if you've had many pain memories since then, they develop a road, a very well-traveled road. And so these pain receptors are always on. So women develop anxiety responses to sex because of what's happened. These repeated attempts at sexual interaction causing conflict for the woman experiencing post-traumatic stress symptoms. In essence, what happens is that the threat responses in the brain and the body aren't turned off sufficiently to allow pleasure to take over. And there's a particular part of the brain, the anterior cingulate, that's not modulated enough to reduce the threat response. But that's too much information for this event. I simply want to say, I want to add two things before I let the next person speak. And that is, everybody must remember that they're uniquely different. And the worst sin is the sin of comparison. So please don't ever do yourself a disservice and say, but my sister, but my friend, but my mother. Whatever their experiences are, it's uniquely their experience. The genital area is innervated with so many different nerve endings that depending on the pattern of your nerve distribution, you can have pleasurable responses in your perineum. You can like anal sex. You may not have a lot of nerve responses in the clitoral area, and they're mostly in the vagina. All to say that everybody is different. Even two identical twins do not have the same nerve pathways. But men have a much more regular pattern of response and nerve pathways. So that's a whole other species as far as I'm concerned, and that's a whole other seminar. But suffice to say that it's very important when you're being sexually active to focus on pleasure and communication, not on performance. You have to take sex off the table and match physical intimacy with emotional safety. It's very critical. So you can reestablish your boundaries and relearn what touch feels like to you. So it's a relearning experience. That's why you need an able, willing, sensitive partner to be able to do this with. But it's so important also to touch yourselves and figure out what gives you pleasure. And I know that this is a difficult thing for many women to do because it's against their religion, it's against their culture, but it really does help you if you're looking for more sexual satisfaction to begin with yourself and understand what pleases you and be able to communicate that with your partner. And the final thing I'll say is, you must know that you must be able to stop whenever you want. You cannot willingly submit yourself to a sexual experience because you think you should. It's not okay to do that. It sets you back. So it's important to stop when necessary and proceed when you feel emotionally safe to become more physically intimate.
Great. Thank you so much, Joanna, for that introduction and that clinical overview as well. You know, we recognize it's a very complicated issue, and I think it's really important, as you said, to recognize also that everyone is different and everyone is unique, and to recognize with potential sexual impacts from survivors of FGC, it can vary, but also that women who have not undergone it can also have sexual impacts as well. So I'd like to,
Can I just say one more thing, because I might not have another chance. For those of you who are really suffering, I strongly suggest going to a gynecologist or a urogynecologist and getting a referral for a pelvic floor therapist, because the pelvic floor muscles are like a basket of muscles holding all the genitals in place. And because of repeated constriction, of not wanting entry or of resistance, those muscles get over tense. And then it's almost impossible to learn how to relax. A pelvic floor therapist will manually massage your internal vagina so that the muscles are relaxing in the way that they need to. I don't know how many people know about that, but it's important to just have that in your vocabulary. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that too. So I do want to invite Sarian and Farzana, if there's anything you'd like to add to that first question. I think we wanted to start with Joanna to really be able to give that clinical perspective and just your work with survivors. But Sarian and Farzana, you both might have different takes in terms of how to answer that question. And I would like Sarian, if you could go for next, that would be great.
Hello, and thanks for having us. Sorry guys, my voice is a bit cracky because I have cold. Yeah. Well, yes, I'm so excited to be here on this panel. We've been looking forward to this. It's finally here. Yeah, my name is Sarian Karim-Kamara. I am from Sierra Leone. I'm based in the UK. I'm also a survivor of FGM. So because of my experience of how FGM affects me, this is why I'm championing the cause to support other women like myself, because it is quite a journey to get to the point of where Joanna is talking about getting to know your body and know yourself. As you know, I am from Sierra Leone, and we have different cultural values and background, you know. Although most of the communities that practice FGM, they do it for one reason, which is control. And the main thing is to control your sexual urge. You know, this is what we believe, because it really, really affects that area, you know. And for me, I only realized that when I become the adult I am today, because I was caught when I was 11. Yeah, to answer the question, because I know we haven't got time and I don't want to bore you guys, but yeah, I have been sexually active since I was 18. I did not have my first orgasm until I was 22. The reason why, because the kind of setting and background where I come from, it's not the place where you have this kind of discussion with your mom or older sisters or auntie or grandma, you understand? Once they caught you just to control you, That's the main reason why they cut you, because they don't want you to bring shame and disgrace to the family. So they believe that once that's your clitoris have been cut off, that is sorted. You know, they believe they deal with that issue, and that's it. You are a woman, you deal with it. So for me, how do I deal with the psychological issues that comes around it? In the first place, I did not even know. I cannot make the connection to my FGM and how it's affecting me in terms of sexually and even my social life. I cannot. Until when I went to England, when there was war in Sierra Leone, I went to England. I've been through so much in terms of relationship, because my husband now is not my first partner. I've been through other relationships before. And our cultural background is where if you are married to someone, you're expected to be totally submissive in terms of sexual, in the bedroom. You understand? Like, you cannot deny your husband sex. It's the biggest crime you could commit, you know? So it's different from community to community. So it all depends on your background and your belief and how you feel. And yeah, Joanna is right when she said, not all women are having this kind of issues as a result of their FGM. She's very right, because we are all caught differently, and we are all caught at different stage in life. So some people are not old enough to remember. Some people are old enough to remember, but it did not affect them in that way. Because sometimes in this practice, they prepare you to go through the Bondo Society, as we call it. So some women and young women in my community, they are looking forward to going to the practice. And because it is normal, so when they come out, they cannot make the connection with whatever they're going through. If they're having any issue, all the girls in the community who have been through FGM are going through the same issues. If they're having pain during sexual intercourse, all the women who are sexually active in their community are going through this. So it becomes the norm. So you cannot connect. So for me, stepping out of Sierra Leone into the UK, I did not know that I'm having all of these issues as a result of my FGM, until when I turned up with my pregnancy at St. Thomas's Hospital in 2003 to give birth to my daughter. I was in labor for 4 days. You understand? For me, that was the first time I can make the connection with my FGM and how it affected me. That was the first time I heard about the word scar tissue. In fact, when the midwife said that to me, it's because of my scar tissue. That's why my vagina would not stretch. I don't even know what she's talking about. It sounds like German to me. You understand? Because I'm from Sierra Leone, and kind of like English is not my first language, you know. So even English at that time, someone has to translate for me, you know. So imagine when you use all those big terminology. For me, that was when I kind of like make the connection. But I got the help and support there and then, you understand? To be able to understand. So I kind of realized that I need to know my body to go past this, because sex was hell. Sex was really, really hell, you know? So I get to kind of like study myself. You know, I understand that, because our communities where we form, you're talking about touching your body and stuff. Yes, I've been through that. Like for me, I know sex, I have to be involved in sexual activities with my partner for me to have pleasurable sex. But our communities, so it's changing now, because we have different sets of generation. Now, before we never have the internet, but now young people can access the internet and they can look up these information about FGM, what's happening and how it's affecting you or the people, victims or survivors of FGM, excuse me. So you see, it was different to our time, you know, so it's so different. So for me, I get to understand that I need to know my body. I need to be ready. I can say no if I'm not ready because I'm in England. You understand? Like, I'll learn all of this there. So I can say no, but before, I don't know how to say no. Right. So you just lie there and take all the pain. You have one sexual intercourse, you suffer for weeks. You understand? But then again, it's not the same for other women because, like I said, we are caught differently. As we can see, according to WHO, there are different types of FGM. You have type 1 to 4. Mm-hmm. And for some people, when they say type 1, it's just pricking. There's no amount of cutting taking place. So someone like that who have been through that kind of FGM, sex in that sense, penetration is not going to be painful compared to me, whose clitoris have been removed from top to bottom. My clitoris have been replaced with really thick scar tissue that doesn't stretch because I was cut twice. I don't have time to go into all of that because we haven't got the time here today. You understand? So it's different. So Joanna is really right when she said you have to take every case as independently. Don't use other people's situation to judge other people. Yeah. It's best to listen. I work at a really, really grassroots level in London and in Sierra Leone, where communities don't understand all of this terminology you're talking about here, you know, like trauma, stress. They don't know that, you know. But for them, they just know they've been through the bond of society. Yeah. And all they're doing, they do their best if they have their daughters to pass on this rite of passage because it is their responsibility to pass it on. So for me, in terms of recognizing how FGM affect our sexual life or in terms of your mental health, it's the fact that you're not able, as most survivors are not able to make the connection to say, FGM affects me A, B, C. So yeah, this is why we're creating the safe space as women, as survivors, where we share experience because everybody have their own story. Yes. Even my sisters we were all caught on the same day, they have their own experience to FGM. Like we were initiated, 15 of us, I was the only one that was caught twice. So it's so different. You see? So yeah, I think I am going to stop there because I don't really want to take so much of your time. If you have any more questions in terms of that, yeah, let me know because I'm going to be here till the end of the program. But yes, I want everybody to know that, yeah, I've gone past that stage. I can have full orgasm because I was able to understand my body and I have a partner who understand what yes and no mean in terms of intercourse. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarian, so much for that. I think that it was very helpful to have your perspective as well in terms of, as I mentioned, Joanna was able to give sort of the broader psychotherapist clinical overview, and I think it's helpful to really have it from your perspective and your experience, and really also with working with other women. And we are going to later on talk about healing, so we'll get a chance to ask you a little bit more about the healing process too. But I would like to now just turn it over to Farzana and to ask if you would like to bring up anything. I think Sarian also did refer to the different types of FGC, and particularly type 1, type 2, type 4. And I think that it would be helpful to talk about some of the other types, particularly Farzana. You have a book coming out, 7, or is out, and 7, and it deals with FGC in the Bora community. And within the Bora community, type 1 is the type that is often performed. So I'd love to ask you that same question about what are some of the mental health consequences and sexual health impacts. And then connected to that, in your book, you do portray different Bora characters who have different emotional and sexual impacts of FGC. So could you talk more about that and why you chose to do that?
Yeah. And thank you, Joanna and Sarian, for what you contributed here. I think that was really great. So in my book 7, I'm talking about the type 1 FGC that happens in the Dawoodi Bora community, which involves cutting the clitoral hood. But, you know, there's no standardization because it's done, even if it's done by medical professionals, there's no standardization. So it could be the clitoral hood, and there could be more damage to the clitoris as well. And so I've portrayed a number of female characters who have different responses to sex, and also different ways of remembering the trauma. And I think that was really important what Joanna talked about, that there are, you know, this is often implicit memory. It's not always explicit memory. So implicit memory meaning that it's remembered more in the body, and maybe there isn't this kind of linear narrative, depending on how old you were and all the other factors of who you are. Anyway, so I have one character who remembers every single detail and has a lot of pain. Somebody else who's got like a half memory of it and says, you know, I'm having a great time in that department. That's what she says. And then I have another character who doesn't remember anything and has never had an orgasm in her life. And it was really important for me to portray all of that so that particularly for survivors, for everybody to understand the diversity of experience, but particularly for survivors who might be reading the book, so that they would have an understanding that all reactions, all ways of remembering are normal, you know? And for me, maybe I'll just share a little bit about me. So I'm a survivor as well. And for most of my life, I had a suppressed memory around all of this. But I think that I had unrecognized low-level PTSD around all of this, where you know, it's kind of with hindsight that I'll look back at different things that happened and ways that I was coping with it and ways that I was responding to partners. And I come from a fairly liberal background. I came out as queer in my early 20s. I've had partners of all genders. I have been very much socialized within a social community that is very sex positive. And I would have said, oh, I have no problems with sex and I'm very sex positive. But as I really began to understand and unearth the memories and understand what had gone on for me, I started to realize in hindsight what I had actually been dealing with in my life. And as I was working through the memories, I also had intense like hypervigilance and freeze reactions, nightmares, just a lot of threat responses that I had to work through. And we'll talk later about the process of working that through. I'm a therapist myself, so you know I'm in this very privileged position of being able to say, oh, I think this is happening, and oh, I know what this is. I've worked with clients on this kind of thing. Is this happening? What is going on? You know, and so then I could go and find the right therapists and the right kinds of therapy. I think it's really important that therapists be very trauma informed and have very specific trauma informed skills. I think there's a lot of therapists out there who don't, and they don't end up doing us much good and in fact can do us harm. And so I did find that I was in a process of really turning around my notions around sex and sexuality. And maybe I'll talk about that later. And some of that happens through the book as well. And there are a number of scenes where the characters are working through sexual healing. And just one last thing I want to say is I do hope that we get to focus most of the rest of our conversations on the sexual healing part, because as FGM activists, we have to talk about harm. You know, it's what we have to do. We have to educate. You know, for example, the pro-Kutna people really deny the harm. So we really have to talk about the harm, but I really hope that we get to focus the rest on what does healing look like? What does sexual pleasure look like? Because I think we don't get to talk about that at all. So let's go in that direction now.
You know, that's a perfect transition. I just want to quickly mention, Farzana said Kutna, and I don't know if we defined that term for everybody, but Kutna is what in the Bora community referred to as FGMC. So just wanted to clarify that for anyone who was not aware. And then also, I would love to now just turn over to healing, since I think that was a great segue to that. And Farzana, I might actually start with you, since you started talking about your book. And I would love to know a little bit more about how did you go through your own healing when you were actually writing this book? And if you could tell us about that process a little bit.
Yeah, you know, while I was writing the book, I thought of it as a very separate process. You know, as a novelist, I feel like, you know, the novelist's job is one specific kind of thing. I'm writing a novel. I'm not writing a memoir. I'm not writing my own life. So I was very like compartmentalized about it. But at the same time, I was working through my own healing process. And maybe I'll talk a little bit about the kind of therapies that I engaged with. Would that be? And quite a bit of that ended up finding its way into the character's story, because I really wanted to share some of this in a way so that, again, it was laying out some possibilities. So maybe the first thing I'll talk about is when I first was having a lot of hypervigilance and freeze responses and crying in the middle of sex and not knowing what the hell was going on. I sought a therapist who had some trauma experience, and we did a lot of work on mindfulness, and I brought that work home to my partner. And you know, he was a pretty good, you know, it was clumsy, it was messy, it was hard on us both, because it's alarming, you know, it's alarming probably to see a partner breaking out into tears in the middle of sex. So the mindfulness process is very much about when you start to notice that you're having reactions, you pause, and you pause in a very mindful way, in a way that is like, this is great, I'm pausing. How wonderful is it that I'm pausing? And your partner becomes a bit of a cheerleader as well. How fantastic, let's pause, let's ground. And when we're ready, we continue, if we want to. That was my first experience, and that took quite a lot of time to get used to that. Later on, I did somatic experiencing therapy, which does some of the stuff that Joanna was talking about around, you have this interrupted response because you can't fight. You can't like kick the, you know, person away. You can't run out of the room. And so you have this interrupted trauma response. So what somatic experiencing helps you to do is to complete the response and really be able to tune into the body and what's going on. And then I also did, I'm a therapist who does a lot of inner child work, and I really love it. And so one of the forms of inner child work is called internal family systems therapy. And I'm putting language out there so that people will have it in their vocabulary. And internal family systems therapy gets you working with the protective parts of yourself that maybe have created a number of strategies and coping strategies that are really there to protect the very vulnerable, painful experiences that are underneath. And so you end up working with the painful experiences underneath as a way to heal them. And I found that very, very helpful. And so, you know, in my book, one of the things that I got was, you know, I have a character who is very suppressed and very tightly wound and doesn't talk about anything. So I set up a character, her husband, who is a bit more expressive and more interested, and that was like really a ploy to be able to share a few of these strategies. And so they do the pause technique, so you get an understanding of how that works. They also employ some BDSM, some very light BDSM, which is bondage, where you know, basically the character gives up the immediate control of what's going on for her, so that she's able to kind of relax and let other things happen. So maybe I'll just stop there and let the others talk.
Thank you so much. I think that was really helpful to think about different ways and processes that people can think about healing and therapeutic work that can be done too. So I'd love to actually transition to Sarian again. And if you could tell us a little bit more about both your own healing process, you started to talk about this, and then also I would love for you to touch on the work that you do with other women in their healing processes too.
Thank you. Well, at the moment, I'm running workshops for refugees and asylum seekers in the UK. Most of them are survivors of FGM as well. So part of our workshop, we are talking about FGMC and domestic violence, because most of these things can kind of like linked up together, because sometimes it happens. In my journey, my partner before now, I went to domestic violence because sex was very painful for me, and he would every time he wants sex and I'm not ready. He thinks I was having extramarital affair, or I was not interested in him anymore. And he will fight his way to get it by force. And for me, I was in England, I know what I know. I know you cannot take it by force, it's rape. So we end up fight every time. So we could see the relationship with FGMC and domestic violence. at times. So yeah, in terms of me and my journey, and to say that I have found healing, I think I will be fooling myself and maybe fooling my audience, because there's never a time where you would say, FGM, I am okay now 100%.
That's right.
You know, because sex is thing of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
For me, if I want to have comfortable sex with my husband, like if I want to have sex with my husband tonight, I have to start preparing myself during the day. Like if I'm cooking, I'll play a nice song, you know, public is around me, you know, we joke and laugh, you do a bit of church in there and there, you know, like
Yep.
kind of like just prepare yourself for that. From my experience, I don't know if it might be different for other survivors. I cannot just go bam and sex and think I am going to get to where I want to be. No, it's going to be pain all the way. I have to prepare myself physically and mentally to have comfortable sex. The reason why is because I have really, really thick scar tissues that doesn't stretch. So as you know, that area has to be very, very moist for you to have comfortable sex. And because it is most of the time dry, you have to work your way through it. So it's, for me, it takes longer than for other women. I always use, when I talk to my women or when we have the safe space where we go, I use the mobile phone as example. You know, the old Nokia 3310 and the latest iPhone. You understand? The latest iPhone, if you want to send message, you just touch and it goes. But the Nokia 3310, you have to type. It takes time, but you will still send your message. This is how I normally compare them, you know. And with that one, even if you have Bluetooth, you have to bring the phones together to send a message. But with the latest phone, you just send it and it's gone. But the difference with the Nokia 3310, the battery would last for maybe 2 weeks, while the iPhone might only last maybe 2 or 3 hours. You have to have power bank on the go. So for me, I always use that. So we as women who have been through FGM, and this, most other women in my workshop who are support have shared the same experience. It takes time for them to build up themselves to kind of to be aroused, to get to that point where they can have comfortable sex. But when they're there, they do enjoy it and it lasts. So that's why I'm trying to get at with the phones. Yeah. So yes, it is different again from women to women. For other women within my workshop, when we talk in our safe space, because right now we are at that point where we're talking about sex and pleasure at the moment. We have done 2 workshops on that. This Sunday coming should be our next workshop on that. It's going to be online. Most of them will talk about, you know, they're trying to talk about the scar tissue. Like maybe they might get to that point where they think they are into it, you know, you're enjoying it. And one move, you're out. Because, you know, scar tissue, once you have a tip or the edge, it's very painful.
Yeah.
And it happens to me most of the time. And that would shut me down. It would shut my whole body down. So most of the time, I might just lie there to maybe please my partner because I don't want to push him away, because we walk our way to that point. And it's still happening to me. It's happening to me. It just depends on how you were caught and what you know about your body. You know, so for me, I would not say I have got to that point where I found healing. I am working my way towards it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I think I will leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarian. That was very informative, and I really appreciate you sharing and opening up about your own experience as well too. And I think just back to Farzana's point, I love that we are focusing on healing, because Farzana, you're right. We don't talk about that enough. And I think that's really incredibly important when we're talking about this issue, and recognizing that there are different paths for healing. And I think as Sarian said, also recognizing doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be fully healed, but there are ways to move on that path too.
And can I reinforce just what Sarian just said around like healing isn't a straight road, right? You might feel like you're on a really lovely paved road and everything is going really well for a while, and then suddenly the car breaks down, or suddenly there's a pothole, and that's okay too. I have found that in times in my life when things are extra stressful, I have to do a little bit more work in order to feel like the calm, good feelings around sexuality again. So I just kind of want to put that out, that like there's not this sort of end there's not this one what am I trying to say? There's not healing isn't a destination. It's a process. Yeah.
I agree. Definitely. Thank you for adding that. So I'd like to give Joanna a chance to just maybe, if there's anything you would like to add, just in terms of how you've worked with survivors in, on a path towards healing, that would be great. And then after that, I think we'll turn it over to the audience to ask some questions too.
Well, I do work from a body perspective too, so somatic healing is really important because the trauma happens in the body and the body has to be involved in the healing. And also, I wanted to echo what Sarian was saying about the fact that we go towards healing. We are never healed. There's always more. I don't care who you are. There's always more to understand about yourself. There's always more to uncover. So it's always towards healing. And like Farzana said, the road isn't straight up. It winds around the mountain, and sometimes you're going up and sometimes you're going down. But the road is the issue. It's not the destination that counts. And that is so meaningful because at every impasse, you learn something more about yourself, about your process, about your partner, and he or she about you. And that's really what it's about. And the fact that when you expand the notion of sexuality to include non-painful intimacy, you're enhancing what sensuality is. And sensuality is so important to sexuality. And I think that when we're living in a Western sexually focused culture where orgasm is it, then we lose so much around the sides. It's so big, but if we're just focusing on this one trajectory, almost like a man does, forgive me for saying that, but then we lose so much of the beauty of all around, of the stopping, of the pausing, of the touching, of rubbing one's feet, rubbing one's shoulder, kissing one on the cheek when you're cooking something special. All of that is part of it. But if we're just simply focused on the orgasm, then we miss including that in the experience we're having. So broaden your horizons. Don't think about the end, just think about the road you're on and enjoy the road you're on. And like Farzana and Sarian said, you reach an impasse, you stop, you pause, you regroup, you stop, you try another time. It's not a failure, it's a process. And life is a process and it is messy. And just to remember that,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. All right, so I think we're going to go to, we don't need to share screen yet. So I think we're going to be turning it over to the audience at this point in time and see if anyone would be comfortable asking any questions. And Laura, I might let you start this process if that's okay. Or not Laura, sorry, Kate, my apologies.
No worries, no worries. We have 2 anonymous questions that I think are important to address, and then we can go on to the non-anonymous questions. So the first anonymous question we have in our Q&A chat box is, why do you refer to FGC as FGC rather than FGM?
So I think that's a really great question, and I don't want to really take over with too much about terminology at this point because I think this focus of this webinar is really on the impact of FGMC and sexual healing and healing in general. But in terms of the terminology, you're welcome to go to our website to learn more. But FGMC, it's female genital cutting or female genital mutilation. There are a lot of other terms for it as well. There are local colloquial terms in different communities. Within the Bora community, it is referred to as katna. I don't know in Sierra Leone. Sarian, maybe you can tell us what the term is there. But I think it's important to recognize that they all are referring to the same thing. There are different perspectives in terms of how people view it. Some people feel that cutting is considered a neutral term in terms of recognizing the harm, but maybe not the intention, because some communities are doing this for this idea that it's good for the girl. And mutilation sometimes has a connotation of intending to harm, which isn't necessarily why it's continuing. It can be hard to understand or reconcile, but then other people are very, in particular, some survivors very much want to use FGM, some want to use FGC, some want to use FGMC, you know, so I feel like it's really important to recognize it's all referring to something that is harmful, and it should be up to that person's choice or decision in terms of what they feel comfortable using. So I will say that for that, but I don't want us to kind of get into that conversation at this point, but thank you for bringing that up.
Of course, and I think our second anonymous question might be a little bit more in line. Our second one goes, can I ask you to talk about shame and sex as a survivor? Also, what if you have experienced FGM and you can still climax? Should you be concerned?
I would love to give this to any of the panelists who would like to respond.
I think shame is a huge part of everything to do with sex, not just because of FGMC, but because we live in such sex negative societies, I think all of us, where sex is considered wrong, hidden, bad most of the time, even though we are bombarded with sexualized imagery all the time. So I think shame is something that all of us, probably whether you're a survivor or not, we have to work through. We have to be able to rethink sexuality as something that is about pleasure and play and a fun activity. We have to really rethink it all. So I think shame is like, I think that FGMC is really about stamping shame on the body. And it's very effective in doing so. So there's a lot of work to be done around that. And I found that in my own process, as I got ready to become a bit more public about talking about my own experiences, a lot of that shame has begun to like dissipate. Not completely, but it's dissipating. And maybe I'll let someone else take the second question around.
I'd like to say something about shame too, because shame and trauma go hand in hand. And what happens too, it's part of the betrayal experience that a young child has when somebody that is supposed to protect them does not protect them. So you have the moms, the grandmothers, the aunties taking you to be cut, or some significant person in your life sexually abusing you when he or she is supposed to protect you. And the only way a child who depends on that person for their whole survival can survive themselves after an experience like that is by blaming themselves for what has happened. And this internalized blame becomes shame-based. And so the shame is there from a very young age as a way of still staying connected to the abusing parent, to the parent that betrayed them by tricking them into being cut, any number of scenarios. But that's how shame gets established. And like Farzana is saying, it's really important as an adult to try to work this through, because it doesn't belong on you. It belongs on the people that put it on you. And so part of the therapy can be in mindfulness and in visualization. Imagine what shame looks like and feels like in your body. Imagine concretizing the feeling state and putting it on a shelf or putting it someplace, having a conversation with it, saying, I don't want you anymore. You don't belong to me anymore. It was put on me like a mantle. But I can't own this because I didn't cause this. So it's complicated. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's important to understand some of the how it got established and erected inside of us, because we all suffer from it in one form or another.
And for me, in terms, if we're talking about shame, hello. For me, if I can add to this word of shame in terms of FGMC, you can look at it differently. Like we say, we're from different communities. The communities where I'm from, my country, if you've not been to FGM and you have your clitoris intact, it's a shame on you, you know, because you're isolated, you've been provoked. Women and girls who have been to FGM, they're highly respected in their community because they'll see them as they're complete women, they're clean. So you can look at shame in different angles. For me, I am not ashamed to talk about how FGM affects me because it is not my doing. It is not my fault that I went to FGM. And one thing I always say, I never blame my mom and my grandmother for putting me through FGM because they did that at that point in time because they believed that was the right thing they could do for me. If they know what I know now, which is the reason why I'm not cutting my girls, they would have not cut me and my sisters, you know? And I'm so happy to say that my mom today is working with me to end FGM in Sierra Leone. My grandmother is late. So for me, you can look at shame in different ways. And I think in terms of getting, you know, your, you know, like being through FGM and having orgasm, I think it's an achievement, don't you think? Because in the first place, they cut us to prepare us for sex. But that cutting do ruin the sex life. So this is why it's very important for me to have this conversation. I will just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarian. And yes, I think it is an achievement. So I just want to be cognizant of time. I would love for, if the panelists are okay, and if participants would like to stay on just maybe another 10 minutes or so, just so we can answer a couple of questions from the audience. And Kate, do we have another question?
Yeah, we actually got 2 more anonymous questions that kind of followed the same topic.
Are there any that are interested in coming live too?
Yeah, I believe we have Miss Barry is raising her hand. So if she's okay with that, I can promote her to allow her to ask her question over video. Here, I can do that in 1 second.
Let's try that out. Great, it looks like you've been promoted. Is Satu Berry?
Able to.
Hi.
Oh, hi. How are you guys?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to really just like share your expertise and your experiences. It has been really, really helpful for me. To give you some context, I am 21. I'm currently not sexually active, but I am a survivor of type 1 FGM. So my clitoris was cut off, as far as I know. My gynecologist confirmed, so I'm pretty sure it's accurate. But essentially right now I'm considering getting restoration surgery, but at the same time, I think I should maybe consider other things before jumping straight to surgery, but I don't know what that is. My fear really is that I will not be able to have a normal sex life once I do decide to be sexually active because I've been cut. And so I'm wondering if there are other things that I should consider first before surgery, or yeah, I just don't know what to do moving forward. And I just wanted some advice on that.
Thank you so much for asking your question, for telling, and you know, opening up and being honest about that too. I just want to start off and say, like, it is a very personal decision, and I think that there are a lot of different ways, and there are a lot of survivors that choose different processes or how to respond. So I think it's great that you're doing your research and you're really thinking through what would be right for you. So with that, I'll turn it over to any of the speakers if you would like to also respond.
Answer to Barry, are you from Sierra Leone?
Yes, I'm Lola. Howdy, buddy.
Oh, thank you so much for coming up and saying this. I love this when I see young people like yourself, because you see this fight, it is your fight. Honestly, it is your fight. So I really love it. And it's very nice that even though you're not even sexually active at this stage, you're happy to speak about these things. You know, I think you're getting there. Where are you based? Where do you live?
I'm in DC right now, in the US.
Well, I think Mariam would be the best person to link you to services where you can get
Okay.
support, because the survivors groups and workshops you can attend, even though because of the COVID, a lot of people are kind of like moving to online. You could get the help and support, but then it will, like Mariam said, it'll have to be your own personal decision at the end of the day. For me, in my case, I would say I would want to experience sex first.
Okay.
Yeah, this is me. If I was in your situation, I would want to, when I'm ready, see what it's like when you meet the right partner before seeking, because you never know, girl. You've got it. Yeah, but
Yes.
yeah, we catch up some more. But I don't think I am in that position to give you advice on what best to do. There are a lot of women who are considering that. For me, the reason why I will not think of reconstructing my clitoris is because I have found my spot and I would not want it to be ruined. You understand? So yeah, so everybody is different. Yeah?
Okay.
So welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome, darling.
One thing I would just add, you know, Joanna mentioned earlier that like this is physiological, this is emotional, this is like so multifaceted. So you might want to also, I like the idea of having sex first and getting sexually active and really finding out what your body is saying. But also like see if there's any emotional, psychological kind of supports you want to work through. Buy some great books, learn about sexuality, explore things even without a partner, like really understand your own body and your own sexuality before you go forward.
Okay.
There's a really great book called Come As You Are that I really
I just got it today.
Good. You're on your
I
way.
literally just picked it up less than an hour ago from my library.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you.
you're so pretty.
Also, there is, if you're not familiar, there is the US and FGMC network, and they have a list of resources on their website. And there is, since you're thinking about it, I don't know if you've come across, there are certain healthcare professionals and clinics that are doing that work, reconstructive surgery in the US too. But I think some of them would also advise you doing, you know, really looking at the emotional mental health consequences too, and just like that kind of support in those processes. But it really is, at the end of the day, your decision and your choice.
Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Can I just say one thing? There is an organization, maybe not far from where you are, that Angela Peabody runs.
Oh, that's right.
I know her.
Yes.
She's gonna be on a panel tomorrow, and I'm like, wow.
So she has a group for survivors as well. And I don't know, maybe that's something that you could, you know, join also.
Okay.
And there is a doctor who does clitoral restoration in DC or Atlanta, Georgia, I forgot which. So he's not far, along with Marcy, should you ever decide to do that. But along with the books that Farzana is suggesting, I would suggest you get a mirror and start looking at yourself down there and sending great affirmations to yourself down there. Okay. And love every part of your unique body as best you can. It's like a love fest that you must begin with yourself. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
really, really appreciate it.
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
Kate, is there anybody else? I think maybe we could do one last question. And I apologize that we don't have more time to answer more questions, but it's so great to see that people are engaged and really willing to talk about this issue.
For sure. I think Miss Linda would like to ask her questions, so I will promote her to panelist right now.
Great.
Wait, hello? I think my camera's not working. No, it's unable to access my camera. I'm really sorry for that.
We can hear you, which is great.
Okay, so my name is Linda Barry. I'm from Guinea, also Fula. My surname is the same as the girl who just spoke, so I'm like extremely emotionally happy to actually see another Fula girl check into this for similar reasons as me. Really warms my heart. My question is more, so I live in the Netherlands, and while we do have some anti-FGMC organizations in the Netherlands that mostly work on the harm perspective, there are no organizations that work on the healing part at all. And I was cut in Guinea, but I moved here when I was 4. So basically, I have grown up with the fear of what sex would actually entail. I have been sexually active, so I'm still in the process of actually learning and to heal and how to experience sexual pleasure. But just because of the lack of having a space to go to that I felt in my teen years, I actually want to start a platform like this for girls between the ages, I thought 18 to maybe 25 or 30, to talk about sexual pleasure and FGM. But I just don't know how to start, because it's a very, I noticed that in my community, it's a very difficult topic. So I have worked in a lot of organizations that are SHR positive, that are sex positive, but then cutting is never an issue that is then talked about, or people don't know how to talk about it. So that's why I'm here today.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So one thing I was just thinking of off the bat, if you did not know, there is a European NFGMC network, which I think would be a great resource for you. And they do have a website, and we're going to be sending a follow-up email with resources. So we'll make sure to include links to some of the things that we've mentioned during this call as well. But that, I think everyone who gets involved in this field feels similar, like we don't know how to start, but then but you feel that desire, that passion that you do want to do something. And some of it is also connecting with others who want to do that or who are doing that work. And I think, it sounds like you have been thinking about this, and maybe people on this call could be helpful. And if other people who are attending and watching this can think of ways that you can connect, please feel free to share information. That has happened in past webinars where we've had people share their information and wanted to connect with each other. We'll include our information and would love to connect with you on ideas, but I would love to let the speakers also respond to that too.
I was just going to say how wonderful. Like I am seeing, like every month, I feel like I see a new group, some grassroots effort that is starting, and that's amazing. And I would just echo with what Mariya has said, is connect up with a larger, more established group and see what resources they can offer you to make it easier, because they probably will do that.
And there is also, since you're from Guinea, I'm from Sierra Leone. Hello, Miss Barry.
Hello.
Yeah, here in the UK, I'm saying here in the UK, I'm in Sierra Leone at the moment. In the UK, we have a Guinean network, an organization called La Fatelle. I never get it. My French is really rubbish. They are brilliant. Yeah, and they're very, very good. This is a group of Guinean young people come together, men and women, to stamp out FGM. Because as you know, it is so common, in Guinea and the surrounding of Guinea. Yeah, I think you should look them up as well. Yeah, so yeah, I think it's a good idea for you to start up this movement in the Netherlands. Let us know, we'll support you the best way we can. Yeah, definitely. Well done.
Thank you, sister.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. I know there are more questions than we can get to. Unfortunately, we have gone over time, and I just want to be respectful of the guest speakers' time and attendees who have attended. We will be sending a recording out, but maybe Laura, could you just bring up the last slides? Thank you. And I'll hand it over to Kate. Before I hand it over to Kate, thank you so much to the guest speakers. All of you were wonderful, and I think that there really is an appetite for a conversation, or maybe for a continued conversation, so we might have to do this again as well. All right, Kate, take it away.
Yeah, so thank you all so much, everyone, for coming. I know there are so many questions in the Q&A box that I'm looking at. that definitely deserve answers and exploration. So I think really hopefully we can continue to do stuff like this in the future. But for anyone who's interested in learning more, Farzana Doctor's latest novel, 7, explores this theme also in greater detail. You have the links of where to purchase 7 on this slide. You can also do it anywhere else you buy books. Next slide. And finally, if any of you guys have questions or want to get involved with the work of Sahiyo after this webinar, please feel free to contact us through the links on this slide. Again, as Mariya said, we'll also be sending out a follow-up email with an evaluation and recording after this event. Next slide, and thank you all so much for attending.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly, if any of the guest speakers, Sarian, Farzana, or Joanna, if any of you would like to say any last words, please feel free to do so as well.
For me, I just think we should do this more often. I didn't think it was enough. We just got started, you know, and this is very interesting. At least, you know, we could kind of like reach to people we don't normally get to, you know, before now. So yeah, I think, yeah, this is really interesting. I really enjoyed the session. Thank you. If anybody have any questions for me, you can find me on Facebook, Sarian Kamara. You can find me on Twitter at Kamsarian or at KDLK10 on Twitter as well. Thank you so much for having us.
I want to just echo my thanks. Thank you to all of you who came, and to Kate and Mariya and Laura for doing such a great job. And it was so wonderful to be with you, Joanna and Sarian. And I think we probably need like another Q&A session. And if anyone had specific questions for me, you can find me at Farzana Doctor on all the social media. And I'm also, I've started doing an advice column with Sahiyo called Dear Mossy, which is an advice column on relationships and sexuality for survivors of FGM. So send in your questions and I'll answer them through the column as well.
Thank you for that reminder.
You can send them to Sahiyo.
And finally, thank you very much for the participants, for Sahiyo, for bringing us all together. I started working on this issue 20 years ago. And so I can't tell you how heartened I am to see all these organizations, all this interest, all these people involved in this issue. It just is so gratifying that so many people are on board, understanding this, trying to help end it, and trying to talk about healing, because nobody talks about healing. Everybody talks about ending it, of course, but very few people ever focus on healing. And that's initially what I always wanted to do 20 years ago. How do these women heal? What does healing look like? So I am grateful for the panel, for Sarian, for Farzana, for Mariya. Thank you, folks. And maybe we could take all the remaining questions, and that could be the second webinar.
I was thinking that too. I was like, there are a lot of questions, which is wonderful. I think we will definitely reconnect about hosting a second webinar or maybe a series. And we will, in the email out to all of you with the recording, if the speakers, Farzana, Joanna, Sarian, if you're okay, we can include your contact info or your social media handle so that everybody can have that information too.
Yes, please.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, again.
Be well.
Bye.
Thank you.